ready to dive into the second half of 6 Degrees, the single track?
The single song that's 8-tracked, yes.
You're locked and loaded. Okay, so a little backstory on the song 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. So the band started writing, and the idea was, they had written these 5 songs, and they had this 6th song, and the song was going to be about 20 minutes. That was going to give them their 75, 80 minutes of music. But the more they recorded and the more they wrote, the more they realized that the ideas within the song deserved more fleshing out. And so the song grew and eventually became this kind of 45-minute multi-part suite. And I really feel like, Mike Portnoy has talked about this at length in old interviews, that he wanted so badly, it's a single song, we're going to keep it a song. But then he also thought about it from the fan perspective that, like, at this point, there's so much music, and it kind of each part feels so self-contained that it would be such a shame to have to, like, fast forward for 42 minutes to get, if you just wanted to listen to the end or to listen to that middle section. And so, they were kind of tormented over it, but they decided to make it a single track, or to divide it up into single tracks, each section, as opposed to just making it one long thing. Now, Carl, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the podcast, but again, I think this is a great call, and I hate having to fast forward through stuff. But you kind of think that you would go back and forth on it, right?
I think it depends on what we're talking about. I think that, how do I put this? The definition of song, the word song itself, is actually pretty broad. It could mean and encompass a lot of different things. I think when I hear people wanting to consider this a song, like just one song, I just don't look at it that way. I look at this as, if you wanted me to digest this as one song or track, or just you would have presented it to me that way. It's kind of like when someone says, what was your favorite Lord of the Rings books? And they're like, well, it's one book. I'm like, well, no, because you presented it to me as 3.
Yes.
Well, there's 2 books in each one. But all right, you could say it till you're blue in the face, but when I go to the store to buy it, I'm buying 3 books, or I'm buying one set with all 3 volumes or whatever, and that's how I'm reading it. Same thing with this. Like, I'm looking at Overture as a song, About to Crash as a song, War Inside My Head as a song, because that's how it was delivered to me. And it's a very long grouping of music where I don't think I would listen to this from one end to the other. Like, I don't look at it that way. Now, Change of Seasons, I look at that as like it's one song. And in fact, when I go to listen to it, the most annoying thing to me about live versions of this is what is it, the Once in a Lifetime or whatever?
Yeah, they'll split it up, and it's so frustrating.
I hated that so much. But on the live scenes, and they play it like just one end to the other, I'm like, this is exactly how I want it. So maybe I'm the easily manipulated, or like the easily fooled one. Maybe I'm the reason bands can make these decisions and say, well, they'll just take it however I give it to them, and they're right. But that's how I look at it. So this one, I won't go back and forth on this one, because I have it the way I have it, and that's how I remember it. If they go back and forth on it, whatever decision they come to is exactly how I'm going to take it. So to me, we have 8 songs on the second disc of a 2-disc album.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like, yes, it's kind of subjective, but in this regard, I think that whether they had made it one song or not, the song is so good I probably would still listen to it all the way through, and I don't tend to skip around on it. So let's dive into the different sections. So, Carl, whereas the first half of the record, the lyrics were, you had a contribution from Labrie, you had a couple from Portnoy, or from Petrucci, and one from Portnoy. The lyrics were kind of all in different directions. A lot of dealing with personal ideas, but not really a unifying theme. I think the unifying theme kind of comes into play here. So the title, 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, you get kind of 6 different vignettes, so to speak, lyrically, telling these stories of different things. And I think the song begins with an overture that, if I had one, I think I talked about this before. I love this record. I listened to the overture. 6 minutes 50 seconds. It's clever, like it's all orchestrated, but like it's the band doing everything. So they're kind of making an overture with just their instruments, and for lack of a better word, it sounds very orchestral, but with rock and roll instruments, and it's a very cool thing. I wish it was like a minute shorter. It's a lot, and it just kind of goes on and on and on and on and on. And whereas I feel like the overture for Scenes from a Memory is perfect, the perfect length. I can't ever get sick of it. Sometimes, God forbid, when I'm listening to this, I hit the skip button at some point in it. At 3 minutes into it, 4 minutes into it, I know I'm a horrible fan because I just got done saying I love this record. But if I had one criticism, and that it is the only criticism, I feel like the overture is a bit long. What are your thoughts on the overture?
I don't mind the length of it. Thematically and then musically, I follow it great, and sometimes I get in the mood to hear this track, and I really do dig it. I have a criticism with it, and someone's going to hit me over the head for this one. But
we're still getting it over through our eyes.
That, yeah, I know people weren't happy about that one, which is great. More for you if you like it, and I don't. That I think it's great that you like it. Trust me, I wish that I enjoyed more music than I do, because sometimes I think my nitpicking causes me not to enjoy things that really should be easily enjoyable. This might be one of them. I think that Jordan Rudess is not short on talent, but there's no keyboard patches in the world that are going to do this good of a job simulating an orchestra to a point where my ears aren't going to notice and think that's a little cheesy, that's a little cheesy. And it just, I don't think that how heavy they're trying to simulate the strings of an orchestra, I don't think really works. Unless there's something I really don't know about this and they really did record it with an orchestra, which then I'm just going to tell you they processed it really poorly, but it's too much. I think that I wish they just would have laid off the orchestral and horn sounds a bit, because it just sounds too cheesy to me. If you're going to use a keyboard, make it sound like a keyboard. And if you want to lightly sprinkle some stuff in there, that's great. But sometimes I listen and think that just doesn't sound right to me. But small gripe. It doesn't cause me to skip the track. Like I said, musically and thematically, I really do dig it. So I don't find myself often skipping it. Like if I decide I'm going to listen to it, I actually do want to listen to the whole thing. I don't really ever start listening to it and skip the part that I don't like, because there isn't really a part that I don't like.
Well, and I do hear what you're saying, especially on the synthesized sounds. I think that I actually kind of think it's clever the way they use the interplay of just the members of the band. But then again, when they play this, when you get, I think it's on Score, when you get this with the actual orchestra, you're like, oh, it sounds so much better and fuller.
Yeah, so much
exactly.
Better.
Even
the patches he used sounds better than the horns on Best I Can, or Walk the Thin Line, but so that's good.
Absolutely. So the next track, this overture kind of visiting all the themes we're about to hear leads us into About to Crash. Now, Carl, this song has, again, a very classic rock feel to it. John Petrucci pens the lyrics, which I think I was very nervous about how this track was going to play, because I just didn't. I remember thinking about it before I ever heard it and thinking, how are they going to do a song about mental illness? It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, how are you going to make it? And then I listened to the lyrics and I'm like, oh, it's going to be like these vignettes and we're going to tell a story. And it's very classic 70s singer-songwriter. Like, I'm telling a story about somebody, and they hadn't really done this kind of lyrical thing before. Petrucci hasn't, for sure. And this song, I think, nails it. Beautiful riff, the guitar tone, which is amazing. This is, my opinion, the best sounding electric guitar ever recorded on a record, and it is on display throughout this entire record, especially on songs like this. This would be, in my opinion, the best lead tone I've ever heard from anybody ever, and the solo that kind of takes this song into the next track, I think, fully displays that. The way that the drums, the guitar, and the piano patch all work together, it's so beautiful. I can't say enough. I love the way it sounds. It sounds amazing. It's heavy without being metal. It's atmospheric at times. And then again, James just shows up and nails it, like a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful vocal, kind of nailing this kind of more emotive, less aggressive type song beautifully. And it's amazing when you think about over the scope of the record, what he does vocally, because he's kind of all over the place. But I love this track. If it had been the first thing, if there was no overture, I would still love it. I think it works as an opening too. What are your thoughts on About to Crash?
Yeah, so where I think Jordan Rudess, just for me personally, is a little unmemorable with lead lines. Like, I don't often sit and hum or think about a lead line he does, because to be frank, I just don't find them. They never catch me, and they don't stay with me. And maybe I think his patches can be a little cheesy, but where he really shines with composition and piano play, is all over About to Crash. His piano playing on here I find incredibly memorable. In fact, his playing all over this track, I find really sticking with me. In fact, actually, on this whole track, I think the thing that hooks me the most is his piano playing. I think the whole piano in the intro is probably the most memorable thing to me on this whole track, more than anybody else. And everybody else does fantastic on here. Another thing I like about this whole second disc is everybody gets pretty nuanced here. Even sonically a little, things get kind of a little nuanced on this whole album, really. But on this second disc, Mike Portnoy's creative nuances with playing, he's got this great talent to really push the music, even when it's kind of like supposed to kind of hang back a little. He still has this really energetic way of like kind of pushing a tune, and he does that all over this track here, when in a very kind of clear and pristine production. And his playing within the song is one of the things that I really miss about a guy like Mike Portnoy being in the band. Even if on later I didn't dig his heavier tendencies, so to speak, but his playing itself individually was great. And this track is no different. So if this was just the opening track to the album, I could have been just fine with it. I mean, I like Overture, but if I never knew that Overture existed and the album started here, I would have thought to myself, genius. So it on the whole second disc, I'm not sure what I think my favorite track is, but this is in contention.
Yeah, at 5 minutes and 50 seconds, it's long enough to feel like a fully fleshed out song. The next track, Carl, is War Inside My Head, which is the first of Portnoy's contributions. Now, War Inside My Head is a little bit shorter, and it's very aggressive, and I kind of feel like this and the song that come up next, The Test That Stumped Them All, feel like very much part of the same song. But for this contribution, Portnoy, his lyrical contribution very much is kind of detailing somebody who's a soldier who's been traumatized by war. I always think of Vietnam. It always makes me think of a Vietnam film. And the lyrics are well done, very, very much evoking that in a good way, in a very imagery-filled way. And the song is just a brutal, just heavy riff. And again, Labrie switching gears, whereas About to Crash, it had a very like feminine, emotive delivery. This is very snarly and very Dave Mustaine-ish, and he really nails this. What are your thoughts on War Inside My Head?
Yeah, he shines on this one. It's obviously we know everybody in the band can play aggressively, and obviously we know James Labrie can sing aggressively. It's not like he's never done it. It's not like it's a new thing for him, but for me, his pushing on this track with kind of the aggressive nature of singing it is what really shines on it for me, and it really sticks with me from here. So very much kudos to James. And again, this is, James is a rare talent. His ability to switch gears, is all over the place. And you've got bands that switch gears, right? You've got King's X between Ty Tabor and Doug Pinnick. When they trade off singing, they have very different styles, but I mean, neither one's going to sing like the other. Even, when you hear Ty Tabor, he kind of really lets it rip on some of the Jelly Jam stuff, but for the most part, they are who they are, and they work it together. James, he's kind of a one-man show with going from, kind of a more straight thing or a soft thing or an aggressive thing or a soul thing. So having him all over the second disc has to make this whole process a lot easier. I mean, I can't think of too many singers who would do this album with this much variety in their vocal attack. And singers I love. I can't think of any other one singer, who would accomplish that. So kudos to him. But yeah, this is also in contention for what I think is my favorite track on the second disc. It's a hard track, pretty riff oriented. The chorus is solid, so it's a great tune. Well, and it segues right into The Test That Stumped Them All, which features one of the most crazy. This was another one of my, I practiced this for years, kind of intro, just crazy guitar, keyboard, bass interplay that starts off the song, and then slamming into one of the heaviest riffs. The interesting thing about The Test That Stumped Them All is, again, with Portnoy lyrics, the song has a very
this is the first one that I feel like is what I imagine this whole thing would be about. So it's very much telling the tale of somebody maybe locked inside of an insane asylum and the things they're going through. And it features, lyrics that could almost come off as cheesy. I think what really works is that, so Portnoy and James both sing on it. And James, he does a really good job of almost like taking on these different character roles in this song, and like him and Portnoy going back and forth, like with these falsetto things in the choruses. The riff itself, it might be the heaviest thing Dream Theater's ever recorded. Just the main riff, just sonically, just fills up space. And then I really think, I'm sorry, it's not Portnoy singing. I think I misunderstood the liner notes. It's James doing all of it. So kind of doing these high pitched vocals, call and response with himself, kind of different characters. I will say, at the time, I read this, and I wish I could remember where. I was trying to find it before we did this podcast. A lot has been made about Mike Portnoy and James's, I don't want to say falling out. It's always felt chilly, especially since Mike Portnoy left the band. But at the time, when this record came out, somebody had asked him about this song in particular, and I remember him actually giving James a lot of praise and saying, I handed him these lyrics, and we handed him this song, and I really didn't know what he was going to do. And he stood up to the plate and was like, this is what I'm going to do. And he owned it. And we were basically asking him to like sing 5 different characters over the course of 5 minutes and make it all sound different. And I think that, and you see this on The Astonishing a little bit too. He's not one of those guys that's like a prima donna, like, oh, really? Like, nope, hand me the lyrics. I'll figure it out. Let's do it. And it's got to be so refreshing to be in a band with somebody like that, where that's the singer's attitude. You know what I mean? Like, I'm game. Let's do this. And I think here he nails it. Might also be one of my favorite John Petrucci guitar solos. Carl, what are your thoughts on this freaking heavy ass track?
I don't want to seem like I'm going to gush over James LaBrie for the whole second disc, but I kind of really do want to gush over James LaBrie for the whole second disc. And I'm going to say rare talent again. There's kind of something with lyrics that like not every singer can do. I can't believe I'm going to give a compliment to Meatloaf here, but guys like, Meatloaf can take a lot of words and throw them into a very short span of time.
Yeah.
And, I hear a lot of, there's a lot of vocal theater, people that can do the same thing. If you ever go to theater and listen to musicals and whatnot, it's not easy to do. And you get a lot of other guys that can seem to throw a lot of words together. Bruce Springsteen can do it. Bob Seger can do it. There's a lot of guys who can do it, but outside of theater, you don't ever hear that done to kind of like a big musical extent. You hear it done in kind of a Bob Seger way, or in kind of a Meatloaf kind of way, or kind of like a Bruce Springsteen kind of way, or John Mellencamp kind of way. Like you hear it like as a very matter of fact, I am the everyman, and I'm going to tell you a story over a guitar line. And again, rare talent. It is to, I think, take that, take a lot of words, throw them into a small space, but at the same time, we're going to get real musical with it. And not only that, we're going to kind of get a little character driven with it. And a lot of progressive, rock and metal bands try to capture personalities. I don't think there's a singer that does it as well as James LaBrie. And if you want any one shining example of what I think the thing that really makes James LaBrie unique, it's not the range. Lots of singers have range. Lots of young singers, very few old singers, but it's not the range. It's not even the tonal quality of the voice. That's not a talent thing. You're born with how your voice sounds. You can manipulate it, but if somebody has a soft voice like his, I just like that a lot. But the real talent is all over this track. The ability to just kind of shove a bunch of stuff together and sing it without just talking it, but sometimes talking it to a character is amazing. And again, this is one of my, there's like 3 tracks on here that are my contention for the best ones.
And they've been the last 3 we've talked about. Yeah.
It's these 3. Yeah. The rest of the tracks I like. I'm not going to say that I don't, but if you were to tell me, if I was I always try to pick between these 3, like which is my favorite. And I have a really hard time, figuring that one out. But the intro to this track, not to ignore the other guys, but the intro to this, like you said, is amazing. The whole track is great. I don't think I can say enough good about it. Actually, with as much as I gushed about the track, it's probably is my favorite.
It's such a thing to behold. It's such a display of everybody's abilities over the course of the 5 minutes. These 3 tracks, this like 12, 13 minutes of music, it's just so wonderful. And it's recorded so well, and there's a lot of production and mixing tricks that are done. It just feels very lush and fleshed out and heavy and crushing all at the same time. The next track, Goodnight Kiss, is like the antithesis of everything that's come before it. It is just the whole bottom falls out. We kind of get this big crescendo with the Test That Stumped Them All, and then we get this very minimalized, very sparse, kind of chimey electric guitar that leads us through another lyric provided by Portnoy, a narrative that obviously feels like being sung from the perspective of a woman and maybe dealing with a miscarriage or something like that. And again, a really difficult topic, I think, to sum up with a lyric, especially when the lyric's being written by a man. But yet somehow it works, and I feel again that like when I listen to this, it's very moving and touching, which I think is incredibly difficult. I don't know that I would be able to do that, or that artistically I would feel like I have a right to do it. But I don't ever think that when I'm listening to it. I think it's a very beautiful thing. I don't know if there's any inspiration. I don't know anything about it. I just know Portnoy wrote the lyric, but it's a beautiful lyric, and it really, the song itself, the first 3 minutes is very just like a verse, chorus, and I think it's beautiful and well sung by James. And then there's this whole coda at the end that has a very beautiful, very building guitar solo that kind of just crescendos up into the very end of the song, and it may be my favorite John Petrucci guitar solo on this record. It's one of his best, again, kind of in the vein of like Lines in the Sand, a very slow, emotive solo, not overplayed at any point. And again, like you just said, I don't want to gush about Labrie, but I guess when we talk about singers, and I know I read somewhere that somebody was talking about one of our past episodes that they didn't necessarily like my Russell Allen comparison or something I said about Russell Allen. And I guess the point I was trying to make was with Dream Theater, with a different singer, with maybe a more masculine singer, I just feel like a lot of this material wouldn't come off the same. I don't know what they would sound like, but it wouldn't sound like what it sounds like, and I like it so much. James Labrie has a very soft, wispy, feminine voice, especially in his lower range, and on a song like this, with this lyric, I don't think it would work if Bruce Dickinson or Rob Halford was singing it.
Russell
Allen. I love those guys.
Yeah.
They're amazing singers, but I don't think a man can sing about lavender in somebody's bed and a goodnight kiss. I just don't think they can, but James Labrie can. And you know who else could? Steve Perry. Like, this is the type of song that Steve Perry part of his voice comes out, a very soft. Steve Perry could sing about daisies and sunshines and sunsets, and it didn't matter because it was Steve Perry and he had a beautiful voice, and it's the same kind of thing. So I love this track because I think it highlights that element of the band. And at 6 minutes, it's not too long. It feels like two separate songs, kind of. What are your thoughts on Goodnight Kiss?
Yeah, I don't want to say anything about James Labrie that I haven't already said. Same thing. He adopts a character really well, and it comes off great. I think whenever you've got different singers in your band, your music's going to sound different. I mean, if your head's in the right place, you're going to kind of think, well, I've got the singer, and this is, the singer's got to be able to sing, and I got to be able to write tunes, but, does have to kind of make sense. I think if you took James Labrie out and you put Russell Allen in, I don't think you're getting any of this. I mean, maybe you are. Maybe you're going to get the Test to Stump Them All, but there's just a big degree of change to how it's going to sound. Just echoing you. The solo here is one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite solo sections. Nobody overplays, and it kind of really lets the solo speak for itself when that whole part kind of comes in. My wife puts lavender in the bed. It's got kind of a calming effect as far as the scent goes. So she actually does that, and I think about this song all the time when she does that. She has no idea what I'm talking about, so I never make a joke or anything, but I kind of want to. But yeah, it's a good tune. This is an example of where when the band wants to kind of pull back a little and then just write a tune, this is kind of what happens. They let the song speak for itself, and it's great. And they use a lot of. Here's also another example of where they use a lot of sounds that kind of help with the tune, where maybe the police siren in the glass prison is a little stupid. Here, the baby crying in the monitor, it kind of all adds to, what they're trying to portray. It's a very sad sound, and they're doing it in kind of a very desperate sounding piece of music as far as the time when it kicks in. So it's really like, this is kind of how you do everything right without overplaying. And this is one of the things that makes Dream Theater unique is, what do they sound like when they're not overplaying? And not a lot of prog, well, there's a lot, but there's also a lot of prog bands that don't sound very good when they're not doing that, noodling. Mm-hmm. And this is a kind of an example of where if you don't want to noodle, you don't have to noodle, because everybody else can also do this and it still be very prog and it still sound very good.
Well, and we've gotten so much of it up to this point that it's kind of a nice breather for a second, and it works because it feels so sincere. The next track, so Goodnight Kiss kind of crescendos and then leads us right into a strong, just kind of driving kick drum that kind of starts off this beautiful 12-string guitar riff, acoustic guitar riff that is Solitary Shell. Now, this is a Petrucci lyric, and this song, they really pushed this song hard. They made a radio edit of it. I remember they were trying to get this on radio, and I like this song. It feels very, again, tuneful. Like it's very deliberately a verse and a chorus and a verse and a chorus. And the radio edit kind of chops off the entire last minute and a half, which is an instrumental coda. So it works very much in as of itself a song, and I think it's a really clever lyric. There's a lot of, again, it feels very 70s-ish. It feels like something I would have heard on a Yes record, kind of sandwiched in between two epics. If, it makes sense in that way. It's a very traditional prog song, but very, very tuneful. I wasn't the hugest fan of it back in the day. When I first heard it, I remember thinking that it was maybe one of the weaker moments, but I actually really enjoy this track now. I realize that this is what The Silent Man could have been. This is a good acoustic song that, with the instrumental section at the end, is actually great, and I really love the way the song kind of fleshes out and builds into the final part of this record. Carl, what are your thoughts on Solitary Shell?
Yeah, I didn't like it too much when it came out either, but I kind of had the same awakening to it, I suppose, is the best word to use. It is a really good track. It's not just really good like I've accepted it over time. I think I just didn't ever hear it right, and it just never clicked with me. But that whole ending instrumental sequence at the band, everybody's just locked into what they do really well. Really just kind of ending a song and rolling into the next one. I would have always thought, though, War Inside My Head, I think would have made a really good radio tune. Yeah. It's already short. It's hard hitting. You don't have to do anything with it. I don't know if it's too short. I don't even know if that's possible, but I would have led with a War Inside My Head. If I was thinking put a track on the radio, that's the one I would have gone with. I just don't think that for such a heavy album, I mean, there's so much more heavy on this album than there is anything else. It seems weird to me to go with one of the non-heavy moody tracks to lead it off with, But either way, it's a great tune, I think that we James Labrie kind of gives his immense talent a little bit of a rest here, It's just kind of it's a very straight away, There's not a whole lot in and out of the box, He's just kind of doing a vocal. This is it, we're just going to sing it. And I think the real highlight part is the ending of it and how it leads into the next track.
So it does. It leads right into, it kind of stops, and then you get the beginning solo guitar riff from About to Crash reprised in About to Crash reprise. Petrucci, again, revisiting, I think, the original character that starts off the piece. It feels like a manic flip to the kind of maybe depressive first part of this journey, and it obviously, again, is tying back that idea of the ups and downs of mental illness. I think the riff sounds great. The song has a very upbeat, very just classic rock and roll feel to it. And Labrie's vocals, I think, are great. He sings the shit out of this song. I mean, it just, he owns it. There, unlike a lot of the other songs on the record, there's barely any processing here. And in this particular part of the song, it's just him singing. This is, if you had told me they recorded this live, just on the floor, I would have believed you, because it has a very just upbeat live feel.
It really does.
And you have a coda again at the end, an instrumental section leading us into the final section that is wonderful. Kind of like reprising very shortly all of the instrumental sections and kind of feeling like a piece of the overture stuck back in a song. So I love this track. What are your thoughts on the reprise?
It's got one of my favorite instrumental sections that they have as a band in it.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the entire, I don't know, what is it, like the second half or 2/3 of the track?
Yeah, I mean, the vocals are very brief. It's only maybe like a minute and a half of singing, so.
Yeah, and it really works, but the whole instrumental part is fantastic, so it's one of my favorites they have altogether. Again, there isn't a track on the album I don't like, and this certainly keeps playing into that. It is solid, and it's some of their best playing, again, without overplaying. It really reminds me a lot of Falling Into Infinity, with when they decide to do like an instrumental something, they really just let it speak for itself as opposed to really just blindly noodling. They noodle, which is one of the things you love about the band, but it doesn't like dominate the track or dominate what they're trying to do with the song.
No, it works. It works so well, and it works because it doesn't overstay its welcome. None of this record does. I think they do a really good job of kind of tempering what you'll get on later records, which is maybe the lack of ability to edit. I think the overlong parts or overlong and then really work to kind of give context to the parts that aren't. Carl, About to Crash leads into Losing Time, the grand finale, which is a very apropos title. So this song has a very epic-y halftime feel. I remember at the time reading Mike Portnoy said, the section in Scenes from a Memory, One Last Time, the kind of final section of that where it kind of builds and kind of goes into this epic halftime feel before, Spirit Carries On. They wanted to do that. They wanted something like that again. They wanted that feel, but to kind of elongate it. Now,
that's pretty much that track for like 5.5.
Yeah, exactly. Minutes. Just this big halftime epic sweeping feel.
They do it really well.
Yeah, I remember being. I know the first time I listened to it, I was like, "Ooh, I hope I don't get sick of this." I've never have. What really works is James LaBrie vocally ties it together with a very soft and gentle verse, and then the song kind of crescendos. And his, he's not singing anything nearly as high as he does on Awake or Images of Words on this record, except for maybe the ending part of the song. And while I know vocally he was struggling and some of his range had been lost, and especially live he was really having a hard time, I think that kind of frailty to his voice was working, especially with this material. And here he's like hitting these higher notes, but it's not with the oomph and power of those early records. And I actually really like this part of his voice. It reminds me very much of like later era Journey and what Steve Perry would kind of do to compensate. And the song has a beautiful, beautiful lyric, again, contributed by Petrucci. And I think LaBrie nails it. And he's really the star of this song because it's a very vocal driven song. The band kind of just sitting underneath him and giving him the foundation to kind of carry this message home. I love this track. I love that I feel like it's a very powerful anthemic conclusion to this record. What are your thoughts?
Anthemic is a pretty good word. I don't think I have any thoughts. When the second I heard you say anthemic, I'm like, that's pretty much everything I was going to say wrapped up in one word.
I just feel like the entire crowd swayed back and forth when they played this, when I saw them live, like singing every word. It was a very we're all unified here.
Yeah, no, and it's not like there's, how do I put this? Because James LaBrie isn't, he's not doing the singing into the stratosphere game, but there's a lot of singing on here. It seems sometimes like there's a lot of constant singing, and I got to imagine that there's a certain amount of endurance,
Absolutely.
that would be required for something like this. It's different. We're not throwing a bunch of words in all at once, but he kind of sings a lot as far as like just actual singing goes. Another example of everybody kind of playing to the song, nobody's necessarily, going off doing the thing that they do best, to the 10th degree. Everybody's kind of gelled together, really glued together. I think Mike Portnoy drums it perfectly in a way that I think maybe a lot of other drummers would have tried to have been a little too busy, which is something Mike Portnoy can do. You listen to Hell's Kitchen and you're like, God, this isn't a very fast or aggressive tune. He finds a really inventive way of being really busy playing in and out of that. And here, everybody just kind of says, well, let's just let this song do the talking. And they do. And it's a really good way to close out an album. It's a really good way to close out a second disc of a 2-disc album. And it's interesting because this is a progressive metal band, and they really kind of kicked the heavy doors open for themselves on this one.
Yes.
But both discs tend to kind of end on the not heavy note, which I think speaks volumes to them artistically. That you can be a heavy band and really highlight that, but you can also do more than that on an album, all with still sounding like you're the same band. You're not doing a heavy song and a light song, and you sound like different bands all over the place. It still kind of sounds like one cohesive unit, and they do a good job all over the record, and just the way they cap it off with Losing Time, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I really enjoyed too. Like the record begins with the static that ends Scenes from a Memory, and then the final note of this is going to lead us into Train of Thought when we get on that end. So I do like that they started thematically connecting the records at this point too. It felt to me at this point, Scenes from a Memory is a rebirth. It's kind of a new beginning for the band for a lot of reasons, including lineup changes. But 6 Degrees is that lineup hitting its stride. And I feel like when I think back on this era, this period of the band, seeing this band live, buying their merchandise, buying their music, listening to their music, this was perhaps them at their zenith in ability, not necessarily in terms of popularity. They're going to win a Grammy 10 years from now. This I think represents to me their zenith as a creative unit. Everything is fresh. They're not sitting in the studio for a year and a half trying to crap out Chinese democracy. Like, they're not overthinking things. They're going in and they're just like letting the tape roll, and they're just coming up with genius. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of fans, I feel like this is kind of a high point. And I don't know for me that they really give you a record this completely solid from start to finish again. But that doesn't mean they don't give us amazing records, but I feel very strongly that this is a creative high point, and God bless this band, because by this point in their career, I feel like they'd had 3 of them. They had Images and Words, they had Awake, maybe 4, because I would also say Scenes from a Memory. Like every record kind of being a reaction to the one before it, and then this one kind of pulling it all together. I don't know that there's a scope of material as wide on any of their other records as there is here. I feel like they really kind of give you from artsy-fartsy to heavy to classical to pop. They just kind of go the whole gamut. And whereas they might do that a little bit on Octavarium, I actually like all the songs here. So that's the other thing. I enjoy listening to this from start to finish. I don't want to skip the 2nd track and the 7th track and I'm not bouncing around. I enjoy this from start to finish. Carl, give me your favorite performance for every member of the band on this record.
Yeah, to kind of touch on something you said there, I bounce around with this album only when I don't have the time to listen to the whole thing, and I'm trying to figure out what do I have time to kind of push into whatever time frame I'm working for. As far as my favorite performance from each member, this one shouldn't be very hard. I think Mi-young on Blind Faith.
Yes.
I just don't think the atmosphere is going to be the same without him on it. I just frankly don't. So to me, I think that's is playing to that is pretty important. Let's do Mike. I think War Inside My Head. No, jeez. No, I'm going to go Great Debate. That might sound like a pretty. Of course, you would say Great Debate for Portnoy, but I don't know what the hell else to say. It's his playing on that is just probably half the reason that song's enjoyable for me. As far as James LaBrie goes, I might have to say Testa Stumped Them All.
Yeah.
His singing on there it's just damn impressive. As far as Jordan goes, I want to say Disappear.
Oh, yep.
That's not the thing that is his forte, and he does it like it is, and I can't think of another time where he comes back to doing it that good. And he doesn't just do it good for him. It's perfect. I don't think I would have expected Kevin Moore to do that better. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the thing that I would put Kevin Moore over Jordan Rudess. So very happy with that one. And I got to say for a Portnoy, I got to go with Goodnight Kiss. That the solo on that track is just moody
Petrucci.
and moving. Petrucci. What did I say?
You said Portnoy, and that's okay because
why?
His lack of drums on that track are very impressive.
Yeah. For Petrucci, I'm giving a good night kiss because the solo's perfect and it's so moody and it's so moving to me.
Well, you're not going to like. I'm going to be the ultimate cop out here, and I'm going to call myself on it before I even give you my selection. So, first off, both Me Young and Rudis, I am going to say Blind Faith. I feel that is a very bass, piano-driven song, and I love that track, and I think that they just it works because of them and the atmosphere. For Portnoy, I was going to say The Glass Prison. I feel like that is a song that he really holds together. You know, when you write riffs like that, like really sludgy, heavy riffs, they either work or they don't, and it's a lot of times because of the drummer. Like they're not the most technical riffs, at least the rhythm parts. There's a lot of stereotypical chugging going on there, and I think it's Portnoy and the way his drums sit in the mix that really make it feel driving and percussive. And like you said, he does a very good job of doing that. He's steering the ship. Maybe more so than what drummers would do in a lot of other metal bands. It's not just a guitar band. And for Petrucci, I was struggling with this one a lot, and I'm going to say The Great Debate. I think that I could have picked any of these songs, but I feel like that song there's a lot of disparate riffs, and I feel like he does a really good job with the feedback and the way they kind of fade the song in and out. He's doing stuff that he hadn't really done before, It has a cool solo, don't get me wrong, but all the songs have cool solos. He really plays to the song, but that song I think is really guitar driven in a very Tool way. Tool's a very guitar driven band, a very percussive guitar. Yes. And I think he very much evokes that. And then for Labrie, this is where I'm really copping out. I'm just going to say the entire second disc. Because it very much, if somebody said to me, why do you like James Labrie? What the frick? Why is he even in that band? I wish he wasn't. I would just say, listen to the second disc. If you don't like that, if that doesn't do anything for you, then that is what I like from the band with him. And I will admit that, there's moments, and we'll get to that on the next record when we do that podcast, where you could hear a different, more aggressive singer being more able to handle the material, but I don't like that version of the band. My version of the band that I love, that's Dream Theater, is the band that recorded Images and Words, is the band that recorded the second disc of 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. I like all the other stuff too, it's great, but when I'm thinking about what about the band really hooked me, it's that. And it's a combination of all of these different things, classic progressive rock, all of that kind of coming together. And his voice, a very clean, powerful voice, kind of tying it all together. And so I'm not, when I want to listen to Iron Maiden, I put on Iron Maiden. I completely, and P.S., their live version of Number of the Beast kills. But I completely get that James Labrie is not Bruce Dickinson. And I don't want him to be, And I think that, my favorite Journey record, it's one of my favorite records ever, is the album Escape. It's a very progressive tinged radio rock album. And I feel like on this record, they evoke a lot of that to me. And that kind of record and what that is. And I think that's why it kind of all seals together. So I very strongly feel like this kind of shows off his abilities as a vocalist. Carl, do you have a favorite track on 6 Degrees?
Yeah, I'm taking in both discs kind of as just one album. I'm going to take The Great Debate.
Very, very interesting. I feel like that's a divisive song for people, but I dig it like I dig all of them. I guess if I was going to take one track, it's a tough one. I really like The Glass Prison. I think if I'm only going to take one song off this record for a mix, I'm going to take The Glass Prison because I feel like it might be their best heavy anthem. P.S. There is a Gigantor live disc that was released a few years back from when Dream Theater did that stint with Dave Mustaine on Gigantor. And the Gigantor disc had 2 tracks from every band on it. So the Dream Theater submissions was Panic Attack and The Glass Prison. And for whatever reason, the day they recorded these songs, James Labrie was feeling his oats. And he doesn't often go for it, quote unquote, live, especially with the aggressive stuff. When you listen to them live, he's got to sing an hour and a half, 2 hours. So he's not going to scream. He doesn't scream a lot like he did in the early days because I think he's trying to save his voice. And I would do the same thing. But on that particular day, he must have known they were recording. Maybe he didn't. He sings the shit. His vocal performance on that live version of Glass Prison blows away the studio version. He screams. It's like Awake era James singing Glass Prison. Just owning it. Every section. Just from start to finish, snarling through it perfectly, singing high notes where there wasn't high notes before. It's awesome. And I just love that song. I love that version of it. That's probably the version I listen to most. God, what a great song. What a great band. Carl, we have talked about this record for about as long as this record is, so it might be time to bring it to it.
Yeah, actually, this is we did our Foo Fighters podcast on their whole catalog. We're almost at the same length of time with our podcast on this album. I'm not even kidding. We are, I don't know, we're at like 2,800 measures, and at one, this doesn't give me a timestamp, but it does tell me at 120 BPM, we're like 2,800 measures, and it's like 3,001 for
it's about
for
2 hours, 2 hours and 40 or 1 hour and 40 minutes, my friends. Yes, so 100 minutes. So Carl, we obviously at this point, anybody who's listened this far knows, and we've done a lot of these podcasts on Dream Theater. We love this record. Obviously, we both just talked about it at length. Why don't you give me a parting thought on it and maybe try to sum up where you feel like it sits in their catalog for you?
Maybe it's because the album was so good and there's nothing wrong with their subsequent, never mind. I can't say that. There's something wrong with a lot of their subsequent albums, but as far as my opinion goes, but this is the best. This is the best for me that this band is going to get. They were never going to be as good as this for me. Which isn't to say that they're not good. You know, you might think that The Astonishing is the best thing they've ever done, and that's great. But for me, this is the top of the mountain. And other views from around the mountain were good, but the view from here was the best, and that's how it's going to be for me.
You know, I'm going to borrow your analogy and retread it here for a second. It's kind of like they started climbing a mountain with images and words. And every album, they went a little farther up. I even feel like Falling Into Infinity was a step forward. I know a lot of fans don't, but I think that's a very strong record. And so to me, this is the top of the mountain. And then they start climbing back down with subsequent albums. And like you said, it's not that they're not good because the albums on the way up the mountain are good. But I actually, for as much as I like Awake and Images and Words and Falling Into Infinity, I feel like if I only get one record, if I'm going to a desert island and I can only take one Dream Theater disc, I can't make a compilation, this is the one I would pick. And I wouldn't think about it twice. And I was thinking about this coming up to this podcast this week because we've talked about all the records up to this point, and I have felt very strongly at each time like, oh man, on any given day, this could be my favorite record. But if we're being honest, and we're really just trying to give a solid answer and not wavering, I have to be honest, this is my favorite record. And it's because of that. Because if I could only keep one, Carl, I went through and purged my CDs a while back. I had probably 2,000 CDs, which is a ridiculous amount of music when you're trying to move it. Just totes and totes of CDs, you know?
That's a lot.
It's a stupid amount. And I just had to be honest. This is actually a topic that's on a forum we're both on that I was thinking about it. If you have the time and energy and the space to keep your music collection, God bless you, because you paid for that music. But I had moved a bunch and I was getting ready to move again, and I just didn't want to move the music. So I just purged it. I've got my record collection, and the vinyl I feel like is a better representation. But there was what, so for how do you purge 2,000 discs and get it down to like 100 records? Well, that's easy. I had 50 Dream Theater discs, right? So I'm going to reduce it down. What's the one record I can't live without? And then the rest I get rid of because I have it, on Spotify or whatever. The one record I kept was 6 Degrees. Not only because I love the packaging so much, but because it was like, if the world ended tomorrow and I only had a CD player, like this was my rationale. And I'm going to fire up a generator to listen to music because that's, this is no more cloud. There's no more anything. This is the one record I'd want to have. It's the one I would want to listen to at any given point. So we've reached the top of the mountain. So I guess it's all downhill from here for the...
Absolutely.
I actually think that the discussions might actually be more interesting to listen to because we're not just going to be like circle jerking with Dream Theater the whole time.
Yeah. You and I aren't going to even agree on the reasons we don't like some of the subsequent, however you say it, albums.
I say things weird,
so
man.
we're going to agree on some points.
Yeah.
But
so I think going forward, we're going to continue doing this. We're obviously going to go all the way through, and we're kind of hoping that when Dream Theater's next record comes out sometime next year, we'll be up to that point, caught up. we've been kind of once every 2 months or so we've been doing one of these podcasts. So we'll stay on that kind of schedule. But
man, we got a lot to go.
Well, the other ones are going to be
how many
easier.
more albums do we have?
Well, I got
because we're not going to like them as much.
Well, there's 7 more records. So,
Jim, if The Astonishing is going to take us an astonishingly long amount of time to do.
Yeah.
When we get to it, can we just skip that one?
I tell you that I think I texted you this a while back, like about 6 weeks ago. I sat down and I forced myself to listen to it all the way through for the purpose of bookmarking the tracks. I wanted to make a compilation because I felt like the problem with the record was I had listened to it probably 3 or 4 times, and I tried to cherry pick. It's just very dense, and it was feeling like a chore. And I read some people online say like, well, you got to do this, or you got to listen to it like this, or you have to be thinking about this, or you need to sit down and like hold the booklet and read it. And I'm sorry, I don't feel like it should be that much work to like a record. Like I don't want to have to make it a homework assignment. But
I don't have to go into that much effort if I go to listen to a musical. Like I can listen to Phantom of the Opera without ever having seen Phantom of the Opera, and it's not that much work.
No, exactly, because it transcends. So I sat down and I was like, I'm going to listen to the songs. I'm not going to be distracted, and I'm going to like cherry pick the song. And I did that. And I went song by song, and I made notes, of the ones I liked that I was going to compile, and the ones I wasn't going to compile, and I got through the whole damn thing, and wouldn't you know, I ended up with like 7 songs. It was like, well, that's pretty anticlimactic. I have a 35-minute EP that I would want to listen to, and it was just kind of funny because I was thinking to myself like, am I being too hard on this? And I was like, no. I listened to whatever track, and I get to the end of it, like I never want to hear that again. Like, all right, that's the 4th time I've heard it. I'm good. It's just not. It doesn't do anything for me. And it's funny because a lot of the things we just said about 6 Degrees, I would say about The Astonishing. James sounds great. Jordan plays a lot of piano. I love. It just. So what is the difference? I don't know, because the ingredients are all there, but it's like you put them in the wrong order, and now it doesn't taste like a cake. It tastes like a shit sandwich. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. So, all right, man. Well, I think
it will be there when we get there.
Exactly. Oh yeah, it's not going anywhere. So, all right, that concludes our podcast. Thank you for listening to another episode of Geek USA. Follow us on Twitter at geekusa_podcast and email us at geekusapodcast@gmail.com.